Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 7, Episode 8. It's called After Before. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. And something I noticed here that might be a little trend for this portion of the season is that, last episode was very much Mac and Deke focused, and this episode is definitely, maybe not as heavily, because we still see the other characters, but it's still pretty heavily Yo-Yo and May focused, and I feel like they're going through a little portion here in the season where they're focusing in on one or two characters per episode and giving them a chance to kind of be the centerpiece, and giving each character not necessarily a last hurrah because we're not at the end yet, but
just a little bit of individual time to shine.
Yeah, and much like last week's I'd say it was more Mac's episode from a emotional arc point of view, and this week was definitely more Yo-Yo's. But yeah, they both had a lot of stuff for Deke and May respectively as well. So we've been talking a lot this season about how we've been going back into Hydra, which was kind of the real dawn of the show when it got good, and how that and became an intricate part of the whole thing. And I think it's interesting that we're essentially doing greatest hits this season, because this episode brought us back into the Inhumans, and Jiaying, who we even see, they're not on screen together, but a bit of a dollhouse reunion of sorts this episode, because of Souza. So it was fun seeing her again. Obviously, it's messing with the timeline a little bit. We see Gordon again, who I remembered his name. I forget so many names, but as soon as I saw him with his eyes missing, I'm like, that's Gordon. I'm like, is that his name? I think that's his name. And then they called him Gordon, and I was like, yes, I got it.
Like, I didn't see him straight away. I just heard them say Gordon. I went, oh, that's the blind dude. I knew immediately who they were talking about. And usually there's a lot of names like that. They'll say it, and it'll be nothing to me until I see them and hope they've got something recognizable that makes it clear. I mean, he does. It would have clicked pretty quickly, I'm sure. But just his name was enough to be like, oh, I know exactly who that guy is. Yeah,
I don't know why that name's so memorable, but it was. So basically, the reason why this is all happening, we find out that when May and Yo-Yo came to get Mac and Deke in the last episode, we were expecting more of the Deke squad this episode, and that never happened. So maybe we'll see them after they've been like a well-oiled team for a few years at some point or something. I don't know. But that for the people on the Zephyr, that actually wasn't the same amount of time. For them, they actually jumped. It was like minutes to them, and then all of a sudden, Mac and Deke are back in the ship with the others in the Quinjet. And it's like, okay, so they keep having these jumps, and what they're doing is essentially, and this is what happens later in the episode for the bulk of it, is that they send May and Yo-Yo out on a mission where, from the Zephyr's point of view, it's going to be minutes, like
it's 20 minutes.
Well, no, not for all the jumps. The 20 minutes was until the entire thing imploded. And
oh, sure,
nothing.
Yeah.
The jumps, because there were several jumps in between, so it was every few minutes for them. Whereas for Yo-Yo and May, it was like every several hours. Maybe the first one was like a day. It keeps shortening. The idea being, if they can fly the Quinjet back to where the Zephyr is, they can dock with it before it jumps again and be reunited. But the idea that they're actually predicting when this is going to happen, so they can go out and do a mission and come back and sort of rendezvous with the ship.
Yeah, I got the impression it was kind of like halving in time each jump. Like, so if the first one was a day, then the next one was 12 hours, and so on.
Yeah, and the intervals themselves were getting shorter. Like, they were sort of staying, like, from the Zephyr's point of view, it wasn't just the jumps that were getting shorter. They were sort of sticking around longer before they were jumping. Yeah. So basically, the time drive thing is malfunctioning, and it's doing this warping thing. And if they had someone fast enough to pull out a piece of it, then that would maybe solve the problem. But of course, Yo-Yo's powers are on the fritz. They have been, all season. And the plan is Sky shows up. She's meant to be lying in bed and resting, and she's like, "Hey, it's 1983. Jiaying's like around. We could, if anyone knows how to cure any human of their powers malfunction, it's probably going to be her." So,
she's not wrong.
So yeah, it's actually really interesting because this was season 2's big thing. Other than of course her father, it was the Inhumans, it was her mother, it was all this stuff. So we get to return to all this and experience it. And obviously, we knew that her mother was immortal. Well, not immortal, but she'd been, she's essentially been immortal for a while. And so obviously, we get to see her. She's the same age. Makes sense. Doesn't contradict anything. And this is before she became kind of an extremist as well, because obviously that backstory was all sort of baked in, and we heard about all that. This was pre being cut up, to be specific. So this had a journey for May and Yo-Yo. It also had some, I thought, interesting reveals. I thought the reveal of Jiaying having another daughter was actually quite well done in the way that it kind of became obvious through the dialogue, because there was a moment for me when they were kind of talking to each other when it realized the way they were talking was more mother and daughter than it was leader of this inhuman place. And
I wasn't 100% sure if it was like a biological daughter or if it was like an adoptive thing. Like, she'd found her as an inhuman when she was so young and had taken her in as a mother. I wasn't 100% sure on that still.
I could see that wiggle room. I feel like as soon as I had the realization that it was her daughter, because the way she was talking about her when she was younger, I was like, oh, this is a daughter. I was like, it has to be a real daughter, just because we're going to have her versus Skye before the end of this show.
That sounds
it's going to happen.
Fun. And also, she's lived so long, it's definitely not implausible that she'd had other kids, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. So, I mean, and the fact that Skye might even learn she had a sister who, in the original timeline, committed suicide, which I actually kind of like the Nathaniel Malick thing of he's recruiting people who are going to otherwise die and sort of building like a... almost
it's very, Travelers.
Well, it's almost like a paradox army, right? Where it's all these people who shouldn't exist, who are all supposed to die earlier. And he's given himself Skye's powers, of course. Obviously, her sister here has like sort of weird flame explosion powers that we get sort of glimpses of, and we see the aftermath of it. And the others consider her quite dangerous because of all the power that she's using. Blah blah. She accidentally almost kills a few people. It seems to be a thing, but she's going to kill herself, and Nathaniel interrupts and kind of talks her out of it. And I think it's quite a fascinating idea, and it means that we're going to have some really cool fights in the future, because we're going to have like a full team of supervillains potentially, at the very least 2, and which is interesting because Yo-Yo gets an upgrade. We'll talk about that later in this episode.
But who else could he recruit now? Is like, where does this end?
I think what's impressive to me about this one is that this is kind of out of nowhere, but it doesn't feel like cheap to me at all.
Yeah, I know, I'm with you. Like, it feels like it fits perfectly within the framework of the world, and not just like they've just thrown this in out of nowhere, even though like a lot of this detail is kind of just out of nowhere fundamentally. Like, they're like, well, this happened and it's fine, but because it's weaved in naturally, you buy it, and that makes it okay.
I wonder if Skye herself is going to become a paradox. Like,
well, there's an allusion to this here, isn't it, where Mac wants, I think it's Coulson, to kind of check over, well, how's this going to affect the timeline? They talk about, well, your parents died, and things are still kind of okay. It's like, yeah, but I was born already.
Yeah. So that's the big thing, is we don't actually get to see the rest of this conversation that he has with Skye, because he takes her aside and he's like, we're not going to go through with this mission until we've really spoke this out and understood the consequences. And we don't get to see that conversation, and I feel like we're going to cut back to that conversation when it's relevant later in the season, and it's probably going to play either during like a sort of twisty moment because she sort of predicted something that might happen because of it, or it's going to be this emotional flashback to the considerations that she might even vanish from history when something happens later. I mean, who knows? Because Jia-Ying doesn't seem to be evil yet, right? In the way that she was back in season 2. Like I say, this is pre-cut up. This is she's an extremist. She's got a hatred for S.H.I.E.L.D. She's got a hatred for the establishment. All these things. This is pre all that. Her henchman dude clearly is already kind of there. But yes, we'll talk about him. But I think it's fascinating, and something I saw online, which is a wonderful, wonderful suggestion, is that back in season 2, Rhaena said, because remember she had visions. Remember that was like a thing.
She was the clairvoyant. Yeah.
She had a vision where her and Skye were going to be running. What do they call the place? Like a sanctuary, afterlife. What do they call it?
Afterlife. Yeah.
That's afterlife. Yeah. See, it's been a while since season 2, so I've forgot the name of the place. Right. But she had this vision of her and Skye running sanctuary and sort of peace and harmony, right, for all the Inhumans. And I saw the suggestion online that what if that actually happens now after the timeline changes, and it was actually a true vision? It was after lots of timeline changes. And I'm like, that'd be kind of a cool thing.
I would also be kind of intrigued by the idea of, okay, maybe these changes go down this route and she doesn't become evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Skye is never born. That puts her in this really neat kind of paradoxical existence with Deke, right?
Not only Deke, more specifically Deke. I was going to also say that Sousa as well. Not that he shouldn't exist, but in the sense that he's out of time, he's out of his era.
Out of time, yeah. But I mean specifically Deke in that he's his timeline of existence, where he was born, doesn't really exist anymore.
That said, though, what if she still does get born, but because the thing that drives her mother crazy doesn't happen,
she's just brought up there, and
the family stays together. They're happy. She's not an orphan anymore. Like all that stuff changes. So we have Erskine, who still exists because much like Deke, because Deke kind of proves that they don't just vanish in this show.
Yeah, I think so. Otherwise, they've got things to answer for if they want to start playing with that now.
Well, I feel like if they do go down that route, they'll have some sort of like caveat that this is why Deke hasn't faded till now, and we'll get like a sad scene of Deke fading from existence or something.
Sure,
like that'll totally happen. If they go down that path, I am giving the writers the benefit of doubt that they will handle Deke if that happens.
If they go down the route of, for example, like Fitz dies. Like, just straight up dies.
Sure.
And it's like, now it is physically impossible for Deke to be born. Whereas right now, there is still a wiggle room where maybe the exact, ripples, not waves, maybe the exact circumstances won't be the same, but there is wiggle room for Deke to exist still.
Yeah. So, no, some interesting stuff there. So they actually talk about what happens here. So they go down, they meet the sister character, whose name I didn't quite grab. Cora.
It's Cora, and I remember that because it's Legend of Korra, as in the sequel to Avatar, and airbending and fire bending, and it fit with her powers, so it kind of just stuck with me.
All right, done, nerd. Good. All right, so basically, there's a couple of good laughs in this episode, and I was actually worried about this episode. Not that I thought it was going to be bad, but I was concerned in the first 5-10 minutes that I'm like, after last week, how is this not going to feel like a come down? Like, how after last week is this not going to feel a bit dull by comparison, even if it's
because
solid?
It's not chopping mall.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though. I thought it did a really smart tactic of hitting different high notes to the point where by the time I got to the end of the episode, I was like, no, this was a wonderful showcase after last week of the show's variety and how it can bounce around completely different things that are equally strong. And yeah, so I did laugh quite a bit when the henchman dude's like really not convinced. He just wants to kill them. Don't believe them. You can't show your powers, but like, oh, that's convenient, right? So they bring out this crystal thing. Oh, humans can't touch that. If humans touch that, they'll die. And Yo-Yo just grabs it, and that was funny on its own because no one was expecting her to do that. And then but I actually had the thought as she does it. I was like, technically that's not her real harm. She's not actually touching that.
And that's the thing. It's doing literally nothing. And obviously we've seen this before. We know it does something, even for Inhumans. So it's and they're staring at going, what's going on? Why is it not working?
Yeah, why is it not doing anything? And May's like, it's like, oh yeah, the prosthetic. And then she touches her head with it, and then it does the light up thing. And you're like, oh, okay, all right, I guess you're Inhuman, all right.
Yeah, I guess we'll believe you.
Yeah, although there's a good moment here because May's actually starting to like sense things even without touching. Now touching makes her stronger, as is made clear later in the episode. It's a stronger connection if she has touching. We find this out again in a good little bit of comedy when they're on the way to the afterlife. She mentions that her and Yo-Yo and Max reunion, she could feel that in the base. And it's kind of this like, wait, that's kind of gross, mate. It's like, yes, it was very awkward, although at times nice. It's like, oh, that's even worse, mate.
Yeah. This is it's a fun way of doing this, and it feels like it's a step to getting her own feelings back, right? In terms of, okay, so first it was nothing, then it was this internalized thing with touch. Now it's externalized that she can kind of just sense.
I kind
so
of
it feels like a progression towards being able to have her own feelings again.
Yeah, and she has this moment here where she convinces Jiaying to like give them a chance and test with the crystal because she says, "No, you cannot believe her," and she starts speaking. I assume Mandarin, maybe Cantonese. I don't know how to tell the difference, but she starts speaking in the other language and makes it very clear that, hey, you believe her, you want to believe her at the very least. And I kind of like this idea that Inhumans have never encountered someone with powers who isn't an Inhuman, and the sort of the weird murkiness that kind of brings with it. But Jiaying does recognize, when we find out later, that she can tell that May has this power. She's dealt with empaths before.
She recognizes it. It's like, okay, look, maybe you're not an Inhuman, but I sense what you got here, right? I'm familiar with it. Details don't really matter.
Yeah, I got a good chuckle out of May saying, where I have to like bond with her with her feelings to make her, because they find out there's no chemical, there's no poison left over from anything. This is completely a mental thing, which
it's pretty much what we've been saying all season.
And it's like, oh, you're going to have to like do some sort of like weird meditation with her and connect with her feelings so she can encounter them. And basically, this is literally my worst nightmare. This is the worst thing ever.
There's the moment where she says it, and the two of them just look at each other and almost laugh because, and you're just like, she just doesn't do feelings.
Yeah. Even the fact that they couldn't do it whilst like doing this like quiet meditation, they had to like spar, which is the way that they bond. Just give it this extra little touch. And so here's something I loved about this like dark memory that comes up for Yo-Yo. There's actually two details that are great. One that I didn't necessarily get right away, but it's a wonderful thing. So the situation is that she was living with her uncle with her brother because her father got into business with shady people, right? Gangs or whatever. And they were living there to be safe, but one of the bad guys tracked them. Well, at least were looking for their father at this place. And they're hiding in the closet, and the uncle's sort of like talking to this guy, just kind of pleading essentially. He's clearly scared. And the guy wants to take this necklace. What I didn't realize at first is that this necklace is the necklace from season 3, where whoever has it, but for the ending, was the one who was going to die.
Yeah.
So that's a neat little touch. But what I love about this scene, and this idea that her like not weakness, but the caveat to her superpower, right, has always been that she has to bounce back to like her starting point.
That's why she's Yo-Yo.
Yeah. This scene is why it's that way, because if you look at what she does in this scene, basically she says to her brother, oh wait, that's whoever's necklace or Nana or whatever, we can't let him take that. And she sneaks out the closet, she grabs it off the table when he's not looking, and then runs back to the closet. She literally runs out and runs back to her starting point. Her entire power and the fault in it, as it were, is based on this moment. I love that. And it didn't spell it out, it didn't say it, it didn't make it clear, she didn't say it out loud.
It's just this psychological safety mechanism of get it, get back. Whereas realistically in that situation, she could have got it and then ran in a different direction, right? Obviously, you're not blaming her for not, because she's a kid and she's scared. But the idea of get the thing and get back to safety, essentially, is what has permeated her entire life from that point. Yeah,
and I like the idea as well, is that it cuts to her as an adult immediately saying that there was a mistake, and obviously the right thing to do was to not take it, because that just made the guy suspicious when he couldn't find it a minute later. But obviously you don't necessarily think she's an idiot, she's just a kid. She's just, operating on kid instinct, and you don't blame her for it. But so I really like that. I love that detail in this scene. So when we get, so obviously they think everyone's going, we'll get to the dark stuff. I want to skip over that for a second. So when they get back to the ship and they think, okay, we're just going to have to parachute out and basically just live in 1983 onwards because the ship's going to implode, basically.
Yeah, and they're all ready for that. They've made preparations.
Yeah, Soza's got all the parachutes ready. They're going to
Simmons
jump out.
has put a little message for Fitz.
Yeah, great. Actually, I love that little message. That idea that, you know what, even if we have to parachute and we don't have the time warp anymore, we, time and space, they've been in our way before. Yeah, and we always find each other. It was kind of a sweet scene. So that was good stuff. And Soza gets a leg, so he doesn't have to limp anymore. Someone just hooked him up with a leg.
Yeah, I'm sure the actor appreciates that.
So, but no, they get back, and Yo-Yo's not fixed. She's been trying to use her powers all episode. She's had all these little moments where she's tried to. The effect kind of happens around her face in the close-up. You sort of see it slow down a little bit.
Just for like a second, yeah.
But she's talking to May, and May says, you always bounce back. And she has this realization that what if she doesn't have to bounce back? That what if that the entire time was never a real thing? Like, just like right now, she can't use her powers because it's a mental block. What if that thing in the first place was always just a mental block? And she goes full Flash and whooshes all the way through the ship, gets to the thing, and pulls out the core or whatever. There was a bit of...
She pulls out some pipe.
There was dialogue at the start. There was actually a thing at the start that said what it was. It doesn't matter. It really is not relevant. But she pulls it out and fixes it briefly, because obviously the end of the episode is that they do actually end up sort of warping somewhere, and the thing spins up and whatnot. But I thought this was a really good moment. The music swelled up. It was kind of a great... And I've seen people complain online that this felt a bit cheap, her getting her... Like, the way her power came back. And I actually really like this moment.
I can only assume these people are the type of people who were convinced it was a physical ailment, like a poison, like Yo-Yo was, and disappointed that it was just a mental thing the whole time, even though that was what always made sense for a character.
Yeah, I don't know. It's for me because of the way it's set up in the flashback so expertly. Because there's so many like TV show episodes that'll do the thing where they insert something in a flashback that's going to become relevant later in the episode. And 9 times out of 10, it usually just feels a bit clunky and forced and like an easy way to achieve something. Here, like, there's a deft hand in the writing here, and something that I really appreciate going through this season. You know, the way they are building up and focusing on characters one by one, and the way they're getting to the finale, and the stuff they're setting up with Skye, where it's going to ultimately be this thing where she might actually get to bond with her mother in some weird way. Because, you know, when they escape from Afterlife, when Nathaniel's got the sister and they've got like an army and they're invading the place, you know, they saved Jiaying, and May gives her a communicator, which implies we're probably going to see her again. This is not the last we're seeing her this season. Yeah,
she says, it's not just a communicator. It's one of the watches that they've been wearing with the countdown that syncs up with the jumps, and they're like, hey, meet us at this time, and we'll be there.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see what the game plan is with that, but I feel like this season, the more it's been continuing and the more it's kind of really starting to hit the notes that what it's building to. It's so funny we started with just, we're chasing Chromicons. Like, the Chromicons, obviously, we still have the one left that's obviously helping Nathaniel out, so it's still relevant, but I think I'm loving what this season is evolving into, and these episodes have been so focused and, like, bringing back certain specific things, focusing on certain characters, and really kind of setting them in the places they need to be in for what I assume is going to be like a blowout last 2 or 3 episodes. I actually do have a mild premise spoiler for next week, just in terms of what type of episode it is.
Do I want to know?
I mean, I can tell. I don't think you'd mind knowing this.
Okay.
So if you don't want to know anything, I guess skip like 5 seconds, because I can say it in like one sentence.
But I'm assuming this was just in the next time
preview
thing that we never watch. But
also, notably, the next one's actually directed by actress who plays Simmons. She's directed the next episode.
Henstridge.
There you go. That's the one. So yeah, skip ahead 5 seconds if you don't want to hear what the premise for the next episode is. Groundhog Day. All right. So
I'm in.
Yeah. So I tend to love when shows do that. So I feel like I trust this show to be the best of it.
That is a gimmick that I should be sick of. I'm not.
No, nor am I. So I'm excited for them doing that. So I really like this episode, and we're not finished talking about it yet because there's a lot of things to mention. But I think this episode is kind of like a raging success. In a lot of ways, it's not as obvious as last week because it's not the like, oh my god, shopping mall robots.
It's low key in comparison.
But it does so many things. It gave Yo-Yo a great focus story. They leveled her up for the final of the show. And this is one of the things, that super speed's so overpowered and you have to find ways to work around it. I think it's really smart giving her this when there's only 5 episodes left, because it's like, okay, we don't have to actually hide it that much. We can just go wild with it.
It's always been a smart restriction on the writing when you've got to keep going and you don't want it to be too strong because, well, what if next season we just go, well, Yo-Yo can do that. It's always a problem you've got to worry about. But now it's like, well, I mean, there's only going to be so many situations left that we have to worry about that, and we can write reasons for that now, so it's fine. Yeah,
it's a limited number of times it's going to be relevant. I think next episode is not going to be relevant at all, because we're focusing kind of on one character, and Yo-Yo's not that character, so we're fine. So I think that's really good. What?
On next episode again, keeping it spoiler free, so to speak. Do we know which character we're focusing on next episode?
I'm sure it's in the preview, which I never watched.
Okay, fair enough.
I think I know who it is, but it's partly speculation.
Okay, fair enough.
Partly speculation, based on one tweet, but I think I know who it is. Anyway, so no, it does that. It gives Yo-Yo this great story, much like Mac and Deke got great beats last episode. May get some. Yo-Yo gets the lion's share, but it actually sort of gave me this great, like, I'm really excited about the villain stuff now. I'm like, oh, I actually kind of like this, that this Malik who shouldn't have existed is recruiting other people who shouldn't exist.
Yeah, and I like how he dresses like a proper cheesy villain in a fun way.
Yeah, he's kind of a tryhard.
He is a bit.
I'm kind of into it.
It's like he knows he shouldn't exist, so he comes in, all in black, and he's just going for it, isn't it?
Yeah, messing with timeline. And I like that. I like the emotional beats with Simmons, with the message. I loved all the stuff with Sousa. There was a lot of little moments actually where they just casually mentioned things in front of Sousa, and he'd be like, "Wait, what?" Like they casually mentioned, like, because when they first brought up that, oh, it'd be nice if Yo-Yo had our super speed. Like he kind of like, wait, what? You can do something? What can you do? Like he just There's just so many little moments like that kind of interspersed throughout. Coulson's got a new body, although he has to charge still at the end.
Which is again a really nice moment where they're like, look, we're just gonna have to shut you off for a few hours to charge, and she's like, just think of it like taking a nap, and he's like, yeah, but it's not though, is it? It's being switched off, and he's like, well, at least let me do it and have that capability for himself, I guess.
Do you know, I something I kind of loved here was that he said that he'd been thirsty for like a year and a half, when he was in the TV, but he had no feeling and he couldn't obviously achieve the sensation of drinking. And I'm like, does he even need to drink? And I almost like it more if he doesn't need to drink. This is just something that he felt a desire to do. It was this craving that he wants to fulfill. He doesn't actually have to do it. He can.
Yeah. Go on.
He's clearly drinking, so his body can take it and consume it, but I don't know if he actually needs to.
I'm of the assumption, again, that key word here, assumption, that he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to do any of that, but it is part of his psychology of why he does it, is to stay sane. I think I don't know if we mentioned, if this was a thing when we did LMDs before in this show, or if I've just I've definitely seen this in other things where when they do this singularity and transplant their human consciousness into other bodies that don't need this thing, if you take away the need for sleep, the need to eat, the need for drinking, they go crazy, because the brain just it loses its grip on reality because it doesn't understand how to cope with those things. So I think it's more of a psychological need to stay human, is to drink, rather than a biological need for this particular body.
Yeah. So no, that stuff was solid. Lots of little moments with the people in the Zephyr. I thought the jumps were handled well. I like the one where Sousa like throws like a walkie-talkie or whatever
and it jumps mid-air.
Yeah, it jumps mid thing. But what I liked about it was not even so much the effect as it's doing it. The fact that we cut to the other characters and then we cut back to the ship when they sort of caught up with them in the timeline.
Yeah,
it was a nice structure to the episode that really made it all kind of flow in a way that made sense.
It was a really smart way of cutting them every time they did a jump. Like that, and cut back and forth. It gave it a really strong narrative structure, like I say. Just it made it really easy to follow what was going on, because it could have been confusing with them running at two different speeds, essentially. Yeah.
So no, I'm very excited for the last run of these episodes, because obviously I always expect to come in and have fun with this, and I had a lot of fun with season 6, but season 6 was definitely not the same sort of emotional impact of 5 or 4 or 3. It was definitely it felt very much like a victory lap, and I think the first batch episodes this season felt like that. But once we got to basically last week's episode, I really feel like this is building to something a bit more special and emotional as the real ending to the show.
I agree. I think part of that is, especially with season 6, is that they know they're not on their final season there, so they can kind of just we can take it easy on this one. We can do all the heavy lifting for the ending, which again is what they did in 5, because they thought it was going to be the ending. And 3 and 4 respectively were just, they didn't know, right? Whereas 5, they thought this could be it, so they really went out and did what could have been a show finale. And then 6, they were like, well, we know we've got 7, so we can kind of just do whatever for 6 and kind of take it easy for a year, essentially.
Yeah, there's a lot of groundwork that was laid for this season, obviously, but it was definitely more of a romp of a season, but comparatively speaking. But I feel like they're setting up a lot of pieces here. They're really sort of starting to question, they're bringing up the Fitzsimmons relationship. We're talking about Skye and her past, and her mum's even back in the picture. Where all these characters are kind of confronting their own like inner demons, and it really feels that we're kind of building up to some really special stuff. And I'm still kind of convinced. I mean, I don't know what the outcome of next week's episode is going to be, but I'm still kind of convinced we're going to see them in some way overlap with either season 1 or maybe just before season 1, where we can sort of see older versions of the characters again.
Yeah, my assumption would be by the end of next week's episode, the time drive is fixed, so to speak, and then we can continue moving forward. And this is how, because we were like, well, I mean, they're going to catch up really soon if we were going at the pace we were. this slows it down for another episode. Essentially, it kind of not drags it out, but it stops it feeling like they're going to overtake themselves too quickly.
I will say I thought it was odd that this had such a unique, colorful episode logo at the start. You know, the title screen was like this really bright, colorful neon 80s thing, and then the rest of the episode, like. And this is not a complaint. It's not relevant to the focus of the episode, but the fact that it was in the 80s was completely irrelevant to anything.
It didn't feel particularly 80s because, you know, Afterlife is so just removed from society by its nature. So my only comment is why they chose the pure colourful. Like, if anything, that title screen would have made more sense last week. Yeah. So I don't know what the choice was there. It's almost like they were mocked up when they were told, you know, okay, the graphic designer who's doing the logos, it's like, right, you got two episodes in the 80s or whatever. Give us 2 80s inspired logos. Yeah.
A moment I really loved, actually, we kind of glossed over, is when they're rendezvousing with the Zephyr. They've actually got a really short window because they've missed the jump they were supposed to rendezvous with, and the next time it's in, you know, there in the sky, it's there. At least as far as anyone on the Zephyr's concerned, it's actually too short an interval for them to dock. Whereas May's like a badass, is like, no, if I can do this in the first pass, I can dock before this jumps again. And I actually thought this shot looked great. This sort of
where he kind of spun up around it, like a flip.
Yeah, it flipped into place. I thought that shot looked fantastic. I mean, that's twice this season where there's been a really good aerial like ship maneuver stuff that's looked really good. So
and really, you know, showcasing how far the effects on this show have come, which really, you know, it made me laugh because there was a line about, you know, from Sousa to, I think it was Simmons, you know, have you ever fallen, you know, have you ever jumped out of a plane before? And she's like, twice, you know, once without a parachute, and at least one of those looked pretty rough from memory. So it was funny just, you know, having that in my mind and then seeing this and being like, yeah, this has come a long way, not just in its storytelling and writing, but in all departments.
Also, Deke doesn't think Sousa knows what electricity is. Just mentioning that. He's like, electricity dangerous. Stand back, Sousa.
Yeah.
Also,
and he wants Enoch to be his drummer.
The deadpan delivery of Enoch saying they're heading towards mortal doom at one point, and Deke's just like, oh, that's reassuring. Thanks, Enoch. But it made me laugh even before Deke's comment, because the way Enoch delivered the line, it was basically doom and gloom, we're all going to die, felt almost upbeat the way he said it. That
it's his standard, not cheerful. I wouldn't describe it as cheerful, but borderline chipper kind of delivery that he has for everything. Like, just slightly upbeat.
Yep. So lots of little lines and stuff there. Because it wasn't a particularly funny episode, you know, compared to last week. Last week was just a laugh a riot, but this still had a lot of funny little beats. Even the character stuff with May and Yo-Yo had a lot of funny little touches.
Yeah, and this is the stuff we've been talking about for years on this show now, about how deftly it manages to balance these tones of, you know, being very funny one moment and then having really strong emotional beats the next.
Yeah. Which I mean, you know, that's a carryover from Whedon shows, right? I mean, he created this, he gave it to his brother and sister-in-law, and they're taking it. And again, amusing that they also ran Dollhouse, and here we have 2 Dollhouse actors in this episode.
So it's funny because I didn't even register that it was kind of like, oh, we've got 2 of them here because they didn't meet.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really in my head, but you know, you're right.
But not only that, the characters were in love in Dollhouse. They
yeah,
were
exactly. If they'd had a scene together in this episode, I'd have been like, oh yeah, it's them. But I didn't kind of put the pieces together because they were so separate.
Given that they're kind of very lately teasing that Skye and Sousa might have a bit of a romance, like it's actually kind of funny when I think about that her mum and this is love interest from Dollhouse.
There was another line in this episode. I can't remember what it was now, but there was just a moment between those two that really made me feel like, yeah, they kind of want to go down that route, or maybe not maybe not that they want to or they are going to, but
I think it's when she's talking to Coulson.
Plausible.
It's when she's talking to Coulson. She's talking about how she's glad he's here. There was just that.
Yeah,
simple.
I think that's the moment. Yeah, they kind of popped into my head. It's like, yeah, they're definitely playing with it.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the sort of thing where they're just both kind of outcasts of time at the end, where they don't really belong in the world, so they just kind of stay together because they've got. I mean, maybe the whole team feels that way. I don't know. Like,
yeah, we don't know where this is going to end.
So really good episode. I thought. I thought it advanced so many things. It's very intricate the way it's advancing both the season plot, all the character plots. The way it's making callbacks to several things. We know we had the necklace from season 3. We've got the Inhuman stuff from season 2. The fact that the Malik is both from both a carryover from Hydra, which is obviously a heavy season 1 thing, but also season 3, because that was the season that had, you know, most of Gideon Malik stuff with Hive and all the rest of it. So it's really, and then on top of that, we have LM&Ds in play, which is mainly a season 4 thing. And then obviously Deke and Enoch are both 5 and 6 in terms of when they came in. So it really feels like the entire show is being represented in this final season, and I appreciate that. So
yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far, but we're starting to get into the meat of it now in this back half, and that's arguably even more exciting.
No, I'm feeling the weight. I'm feeling the emotion a little bit now. It's really starting to sort of creep in, and that feeling you get when you're about to wrap up a show you've been spending years of your life watching, and these characters that feel like family at this point because you've been seeing them, you know, every week for half the year for this will be, you know, 7 years at this point. So
yeah.
So it's no, it always feels a big deal. But yeah, let us know what you thought of this episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the comments below. You can like and subscribe. Like is really important on YouTube. It lets the algorithm know that you think we're worth recommending out and more people will find us. So please do. You can, of course, head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us financially for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. But otherwise, that is us. So get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. Keep watching TV. And have you got any vanilla?